Torben Hendrik, already mounted on his big app, approached Ada as she settled a small dark bay gelding the Valley Ranch had given her to use. "You stay right in front of me today, Ada. That way I can help you if you get in trouble. The trail is going to get kind of tough as we get to the pass." Even across the small distance, the words were muffled by the heavy fog that filled the bottom of the deep canyon. At the older man's comment, Roland looked up in alarm. "I better go see if Ada needs any help." But Chris chuckled under his breath. "I'd stay here and watch if I was you. She's about to bring out the Ada clause." Roland gave a dry laugh, and they heard Ada say, "So, tell me, Torben, how long have you been riding?" The former drummer of some obscure rock band tossed back his dreadlocks with the back of his hand before answering, "Just as long as everyone else, girl. Since the electricity made the cars crap out." Ada nodded sagely. "Oh, that long. Wow. And in 5 months you have not learned a single thing. I had little girls in my 4-H club that rode better than you, and you think you can help me," she paused for effect, "get across a snow-drifted pass?" Chris and Roland watched Torben yank on his app's reins and kick until the horse finally turned around. Ada called after him, "Yep, just like that. We all wish we could confuse our horses by yanking on the wrong side of the bit until they reared up." Torben, his sandy-brown dreadlocks flying across his shoulders, flipped her off. "Snooty, skinny bitch," he muttered, then rode to the head of the trail, where he sat his mount, glaring impatiently at the rest of the group, still saddling and loading the pack animals. As Roland relaxed, Chris grinned. "Told you." They tied the hitches on the pack horse and added him to the line. "You don't have to worry about her, bro. She's got it." Then Chris asked, "What do you think? Do we put our own mounts in the line, or do we let them run loose?" But Roland's eyes were still on his sweetheart, not on the 6 horses they'd brought from home, and Chris was surprised when his friend actually responded, "Loose. That way they can eat whenever we rest." Then, leaving Chris to his own resources, he rushed to Ada's side. They spoke together in low voices for a few moments, until Ada laughed and gave Roland a kiss on the cheek. Reassured, his friend returned to help Chris with the next horse, which happened to be Shaky. As they loaded him with a light pack of their bedrolls, Chris noticed the other men of their group. They had overheard the exchange too, and were grinning beneath their winter beards. A couple of hours later, the trail crossed a high pass, then entered another deep canyon. Following the south-facing side, they encountered snowdrifts crossing deep gullies and skirted around bigger rock formations. Soon the trail leveled out, and they rode along a creek meandering over a wide gravel bed. Riding through young, towering pines, the noonday sun warmed them until they shed their heavy coats and tied them to the back of their saddles. Chris knew the stopover camp must be close when they heard the distinctive sound of a braying mule announcing their arrival. As the welcoming smell of a hot fire drifted across the wide valley, they passed a herd of horses and mules grazing peacefully along a wide gravel creek bed, and the bells tied around their necks pealed prettily across the verdant meadow. They rounded another bend in the trail and finally saw it. Chris couldn't help but think of the TV show Vikings when he looked at the stout wall made of vertical logs. As the group of riders, pack horses, and extra mounts neared it, they could hear the rhythmic sounds of hammers and saws. This camp was still being built, right here in the depths of the Shoshone National Forest. Chris gasped as he saw the fortification. "What? Are you allowed to build that kind of thing way up here?" Megan turned in the saddle, her purple hair wisping across her face. "Who's going to stop us now? Brandon," she indicated the man riding a few paces ahead of her, "helped us build it, and he's a game warden." Chris understood the concept immediately. The barricade was a solid deterrent to a pack of wolves. Doubtful, he asked, but what about a big bear or a cat? That won't stop either of those. She smiled back at him and said, "It'll slow him down long enough." She pointed at the cans tied to strings about halfway up the barricade. "One sound from those, and everyone gets their weapons." He gestured at the band of horses grazing along the creek. What about them? How are they protected? Before Megan could answer, Torben passed on his big Appaloosie. He was trotting fast, passing the line of riders so that he could be with the leaders as they entered the camp. I thought you ranch cowboys were supposed to know this kind of thing. Turning in the saddle as he hurried forward, he scoffed. The mules, idiot. Cats and bears won't tangle with them, not unless they are as stupid as... He bit off the last insult, but added, And I thought all you scarred sons of bitches were supposed to know that stuff. He made a waving gesture around his head. All those weird dreams telling you things? Only moments later, a set of tall wooden gates creaked loudly as they were opened for the riders. They were not built in the normal corral rail formation you found on many of the old places. No, these gates were built as an extension of the palisade surrounding the camp. Upright and tight enough that not even a dog could slip through. Inside the curtain wall, tall pines stood guard over several tents, some of the traditional white wall tent style, and others that were modern blue domes. A large fire pit caught Chris's fireside as it crackled merrily in the frigid air. People jumped up from their log seats to greet the line of riders entering their domain and to take the pack horses so they could be unsaddled. Adam and Brandon warmly greeted another man, leading from the saddle to shake hands. In their conversation, they indicated Chris, and he felt their eyes as they evaluated him. Roland and Ada rode up to flank him, holding the leads to their extra horses, while Megan rode to one of the tie-up rails to dismount and greet the occupants of the camp. As their horses were taken to a makeshift corral, Chris saw a line of younger men and boys sitting at the base of the palisade, watching the others work intently. Brandon brought the leader of the camp to meet them and introduced them. Dawson Pinson, a shorter man wearing one of the classic rancher wool caps and a stout Carhartt coat, approached to greet Chris. So, you are the focus we've all been waiting for. Welcome. Chris gave a wry smile as he leaned from the saddle to shake hands. Yes, I heard everybody and their mother has been looking for me. I'm Chris, and this is my sister Ada. Beside her is her man Roland. Dawson bristled visibly when he saw Ada's face. No longer swollen, her eyes were still surrounded by black circles, and the stitches in her lip were ugly. With a defensive gesture, Chris added, Not mine or Roland's doing. She'll be pretty as a picture again in a few days. With a nod, Dawson accepted his statement, then gestured at Chris's face. Looks like the fire blindness got you as well. Are you all right? Is your Tarin in check? The direct question took Chris aback. He'd been told for 2 days that others were waiting for him, and that they were anxious for him to take his place. Now, this stranger's casual observation suddenly drove it home to him. There were other Tarins, burnt out and struggling to hold on, and they were all waiting for him. Yet, with the man waiting for his reply, he only said, The spirit Tarin has been helping me keep a lid on it. Dawson let his gaze follow Megan as she greeted others warmly. Yes, our Megan. She's one of the best. I was glad when I heard that she was the one they sent after you. Then he added, Brandon and Adam tell me you are only stopping for lunch. So why don't you go to the fire? Our cook is almost ready. My guys will switch out your packs while you eat. Megan was already exchanging light-hearted jokes with the cook as they approached, but she turned sharply when Chris's Tarin responded to the flames inside the pit. Damn it, Chris! Why didn't you say something? But it was already too late. As the firesight locked on the merry blaze, he felt her push his boot-top braces back, then place her hand on the bare skin of his wrist. Without her cloaking, he managed to contain the bliss-laden surges welling through his core. She took the blindfold hanging at his neck and pulled it up over his eyes. Don't look at the fire again, all right? Not until I tell you it's okay. Chris slumped down on one of the logs and turned his back to the fire. Thank you, Megan, he said, and Rusty came to his side and laid down at his feet. She petted the dog on his head and said, You stay real close, bud, and help him, all right? As the others began talking loudly with the man tending the food, she smiled once more at Chris, then left. Torben, carrying his bow, with his quiver now hanging from his belt, called out to the man tending the pots and pans on the fire pit. "Cookie! Dang, I'm glad you're still running the stove around here." Putting a hand on the older, portly man's shoulder, he added, "And you still got that huge hooked nose. Nobody's fixed it for you yet?" Pulling back a fist, he added, "Want me to help you with that?" Putting a large metal spatula at Torben, Cookie said, "See, you don't even know my nose is perfect 'cause your mother shoved your head in a vice when she saw your ugly face." Chris couldn't help but laugh at the jibes, and his mouth watered as the scent of cooking filled the air, and Ada took her seat next to him. "Roland and me saddled your horse for you. He's a huge bay gelding, and we made sure the saddle is adjusted right. All you have to do is pull up the cinch when we get ready to go." He thanked her with a nod as someone handed him a plate of ham and beans, and for a while no one spoke while they concentrated on the hot meal. Eventually, Ada indicated the line of boys seated idly by the barricade. "What's with all those boys over there?" Cookie smiled wryly as he carried a heavy pot to the large table just outside of the fire's reach. "They are from our headquarters. They hear about all the hunting and fishing we get to do out here." His gesture indicated several racks of drying fish strips and red meat. "So they want to come and join us. And the mothers and fathers, they know those kids will learn all kinds of stuff." He chuckled darkly as he stirred the meat in one of his black iron skillets. "But even though their parents know the kids have to work, most of the boys are clueless. They just don't know what it takes to swing a hammer or work a shovel all day." Using his long-handled spatula to gesture at the kids, he said, "The bigger ones were supposed to dig a new privy pit, but they only know how to start the job, then they all sit around waiting for someone else to finish it for them." He laughed again. "Sitting at the wall, not doing anything, no tablet, no phone. Hell, we won't even give them a piece of paper to doodle on. That is more punishment than going without food." Amusement in his voice, he added, "They'll get another shot after lunch." Ada smiled at the man's explanation. "Yeah, in school I met a ton of those kids." Roland added, "All my friends wanted to make flashy cowboy Instagrams or TikToks, but they had no idea how long and boring the work really was." With a pleased smile, Cookie opened a large jar. "Look at this salsa. I swear that woman grows the best tomatoes." He dipped a large spoon into the jar and set it on the table. Casting another sideways glance at the kids sitting at the wall, he said, "Believe it or not, the younger ones hold out longer than the older ones." He shook his head in disbelief. "And all they gotta do is fetch and carry. But even since the electricity went out, most of them have not lacked for a thing. Their mothers and fathers have made sure of that. But they're boys. A missed meal is a powerful incentive for learning to pick up the slack." A distinctive scent made Chris turn around. "Is that coffee I smell?" Cookie laughed, lifting the lid on a large pot hanging from the rack. "Who don't love the smell of coffee? It's brewing. It'll be ready in 5 minutes." Roland groaned with anticipation as the other men of their group chuckled. "Oh, I never thought I'd get another cup." Adam, just licking the last of the beans and salsa off his plate, said, "We got that from the monks over on Carter Mountain. This stuff came from South America, but we all fervently hope that they will now learn to grow it themselves." He took a careful, savoring sip from his cup. "And we'll keep having good, precious coffee." Suddenly, a cry of alarm came from the line of boys sitting at the base of the wall, and they scrambled to their feet. The men around the cook fire rose, dropping plates to grab their weapons, while the men saddling the horses ran to the boys' side. "Cat! Cat! There's a cat, and he's trying to get us through the wall!" a lanky teenager cried as he ran forward, then turned to point at the base of the barricade. Chris, his eyes bandaged and only able to use his fire sight, walked forward, using a straight arm to indicate where he saw the red and orange mass of the predator, but only Ada and Roland knew to follow his motions. Roland knocked an arrow to his bow, while Ada took the long-handled axe from her belt. Rusty stalked by his side as Chris couldn't believe what his eyes told him. The animal, even now jumping to the top of the log barricade, was much bigger than any ordinary cougar should be, almost the size of a bear. It hesitated, massive paws hooked to the top of the edge, as arrows made whistling sounds in the clean spring air, and a couple of missiles pelted the large head looking down at them. It shook its head with a frustrated growl, yet still hooked its hind legs until it crouched above the camp. In short succession, 2 arrows left bows, thwack, thwack, from just behind Chris and embedded themselves in the large predator's chest. Startled, he turned and recognized Brandon and Torben calmly knocking new arrows to their bowstrings. The cougar hissed impotently, then half fell, half sank back off the palisade to hit the ground below with a loud thud. A cheer went through the camp as men raced to open the big gates and ran outside. Brandon thumped Chris's back as he, too, went to investigate the slain critter. One of the boys, a good-looking kid with a wide smile and straight teeth, rushed forward. Branson! Branson! You can't make us sit by the wall anymore! We aren't safe there! Branson hissed out a disparaging noise. Did you get hurt? Anyone have so much as a scratch? No? Then sit your butts back down where I told you. He glowered at them until they retreated to the barricade and seated themselves. Following the other red and orange shapes, Chris stumbled a couple of times over some muddy spots and took the cooling cloth from his eyes. He'd not been wrong about its size. Almost as large as a bear, the cougar's fur was golden with white points around the throat and across the belly. One of the arrows, embedded almost to the feathers at the junction of the throat and chest, must have found the heart, because the body was now completely still. That's going to make a great fur, one of the men said, and as Branson clapped him on the back, he added, I wish I could take a pic. Branson turned to his men, calling, All right, people, let's get the Tarins on their way. Then we'll come back to skin that beauty. All thoughts of a leisurely lunch forgotten, the campmen hustled the travelers onto their fresh mounts and lined the pack horses and extra mounts out. As Rusty brought the 6 loose ranch horses through the gate, the campmen barely gave a goodbye wave before returning their attention to the cat. Roland rose in his stirrups, sniffing the air ostensively. Dang! We didn't even get any coffee! The trail was much easier now, hugging the sides of the valley bottom and winding around crisp-scented pines and green underbrush showing its new leaves, and birds flitted through the growth, singing their spring song with loud enthusiasm. Periodically, Adam led them at a long trot, making time across the easy parts. Chris, riding almost at the end of their line, kept an eye on their loose horses, but Rusty had them well in check. He patted his mount's neck, a bay showing his draft horse heritage and stout legs, canted shoulders, and broad hips. Apparently, your owners think I'm a heavy guy. He chuckled at the big gelding's response, no more than a polite, briefly twitched ear. A big guy that don't know how to ride, he grinned. And, to tell you the truth, I'm glad to have you. Their own horses still looked gaunt and tired. Only a few days ago, they'd ridden them almost to their bottoms. He stretched upward in the saddle towards the warm sun. His Tarin was quiet as they rode northwest, almost in a straight line toward that mysterious waterfall, and his blindfold hung around his neck. Their ride along the meandering river was spectacular. The sharp, gray crags of the mountains loomed high above them, some still covered in snow, sharply contrasting with the deep blue of the spring sky. The sun began to touch the western mountains when they neared a large lake. Adam led them at a trot into a small area where they again found makeshift corrals and a large fire pit along the water's edge, but no palisade, no tents waited there. With practiced ease, the 8 guards set up the ropes that defined the corrals and began unsaddling. To Chris's amazement, Ada handed Roland the reins of her horse and joined Megan as the Tarin began preparing the evening meal. Roland and Chris were hard-pressed to keep up with the experienced mountain hands, but they had the light packs off their ranch horses just in time to turn them loose along with the others. 2 wrangle horses were kept in, who paced the corral pitifully, calling after the others and searching for a way to join the small herd. As they stood in the beauty of the evening, watching the animals find the lush grass beside the lake and listening to the melodic bells tied around their necks, Adam joined them. Roland asked, "How do you know they won't be gone in the morning? They don't even have hobbles on." Adam scrubbed a hand through his thick black hair, then put his cowboy hat back on. "We rode a hard 40 miles today. They're tired, and the grass here is really good. They won't go any farther than they have to." Then he clapped Roland on the shoulder, saying, "Come on, we still have to string the tarps up. The weather looks clear right now, but you never know. We could wake up in the middle of the night, rain and snow pelting down on us." The next morning, loud, clanging bells woke them. Rusty, having slept beside them, laid a cold nose against Chris's cheek. All right, Chris mumbled, and peeled back the borrowed sleeping bag. To his surprise, he could sense the fire in the pit already crackling, and his firesight showed that both Megan and Ada had left the cover of their tarp. He looked down at the dog and mumbled, "You didn't think you needed to wake us up when the girls left, but now that there's fun stuff to do, you want to get me up?" Finding his boots and hat, he added, "Sorry, mongrel." In the frigid morning, with mist from the lake filling their glade, he suddenly heard the men shouting, spooking the running herd into the flimsy corral. With Rusty at his side, he ran towards the milling red and orange forms. "Whoa! Whoa! Whoa!" sounded through the chill morning mist, and the ropes making the corral boundaries creaked loudly, straining against the stout log fence posts, when one of the horses had tried to crash through. Roland came from the shelter, buckling his chinks around his waist as he ran towards the catch pen. Ropes creaked again as another horse attempted to jump out, and Roland arrived just in time to spook the big gelding back. The bells hanging from some of the animals' necks rang loudly as the herd began to mill around the constraints, not showing any signs of settling, and the riders stood outside, flagging back those who were bent on escaping. Megan appeared at Chris's side. "Focus! Your eyes! Let me settle your Tarin!" Her own purple orbs shone as she looked at the wild scene. "Oh my word! They got into that weed last night!" Unable to take their eyes away from the corral, her bared hand found his, and Chris breathed a sigh of relief when his Tarin settled with her assistance. His eyes cleared, and once more he could make out more than just the red, yellow, and white of his firesight. Details became evident, and with a nod of thanks, he ran to get his rope from his saddle. Ada was already getting her own rope there. "What the heck is going on, Chris? They're acting crazy." "It's that weed I've been trying to burn every chance I get. They ate it last night." She stood agape at the wild scene before her, then took a place at the outside of the corral to help keep the herd in. Finding Brandon and Adam, he joined them as they conferred with the spirit Tarin. Adam looked at Chris as he neared them, frustration in his eyes. Addressing Megan, he said, "Is this stuff permanent? And if it's not, how long will this last?" Torben ran up, an arrow knocked to his bow, saying, "Hey, boss, there are a few that are worse than the others. Let me put a couple of arrows in them. That'll slow them down." Together, Brandon and Adam said, "Shut up, Torben." Just then, the ropes creaked once more as one big gelding tried to escape. Rusty ran forward, leaped high, and bit the horse in the nose. With a snort, the big sorrel turned on his heel and sought the middle of the bunch. Adam added, "Go back to holding your spot, Torben." With a haughty stare, the former musician turned about. "Fine, I'll remember that. Back to my holding spot." And he stalked away. Adam rolled his eyes, then turned to Chris. "I assume you know something of this? From your dreams? Do you know what's going on?" Chris looked at the spirit Tarin, but her purple eyes were scanning the horses, and her fingers were making little twitchy motions as her lips moved with unseen words. Fixing his gaze on Adam, he said, "We've been dreaming about this weed. It's bad news. I totally expected something like this to happen to our cows, but I hoped." He let his words trail away. He'd known the horses would be affected as well, but at home, inside their own familiar territory, he'd not been worried about it. If anything, it would have been a day of laughing at whoever had to ride one that was weed crazy. With an exhale, he said, "For some reason, I thought we'd get them one at a time." Brandon, carrying his bow in his hands, hitched the quiver at his hips. "Well, it sure looks as though all of them got into it last night." Megan, her eyes still shining, said, "Not all of them. Some are confused and only running to keep up." Brandon and Adam turned to her sharply. "Which ones?" Brandon asked, and at the same time Adam said, "How long will they be crazy?" But Chris didn't wait to hear the rest. He could tell from here that Pinky was hiding behind Big Skeleton as the gelding valiantly maneuvered through the frantic others. He tried to crawl through the 2 rails of the entrance, but was immediately sent scurrying by one of the mountain horses coming at him, nostrils flaring and front feet striking. Rusty jumped over his scrambling form to send the horse back into the pen with a well-aimed bite to the nose. Roland appeared at his side, mounted on one of the wrangle horses. "Open the rails for me, bro. I'll get her." With Rusty lunging at the frantic horses to clear a path, Chris pulled the rails back so his friend could ride through. "And catch Skeleton. He looks okay, too." The black cowboy hat made an acknowledging nod as his friend put his mount into a trot and entered the stream of horses running around the large catch corral. Skillfully keeping his motions slow, he slipped a rope around Pinky, then followed the flow until he was back at the rails. Chris slid them aside, and when Roland slipped Pinky out, Skeleton fought to come through as well. Ada appeared with a couple of halters. She caught Skeleton at the gate and handed the lead to one of the men outside the corral before returning to slip one over the sleek roan mare. Roland rebuilt his loop and entered the corral again, finding Shaky and working him out. As Chris handled the corral rails for his friend, he was glad to see Sour Patch fighting his way past the crazed others to stay by the stout sorrel's side. Rusty lunged forward once more as the frenzied horses pushed on the rail in Chris's hands, biting the legs, fetlocks, and noses he could reach. Chris called, "Good dog! Good dog!" as he worked to allow Roland and their 2 ranch horses through, while keeping the others confined. It was a miracle that none had been able to jump out, but when he held the rail as Roland entered again, he saw how his friend's quiet movements actually directed the horses to stay inside the ropes. He smiled. They'd all learned this language a long time ago. His mother had taught them the body motions when they'd grown just enough to help her with the colts she was starting, and he sent a quiet prayer to Frey Matuk for his mother's healing. As Roland worked his way free to bring Clory out, Adam appeared at Chris's side, a halter held ready. "Why is he only catching yours?" With a gesture at the crazed animals racing past, eyes wild and nostrils flared, Adam said, "Can you see that none of ours are weed crazy? I imagine they were the new kids on the block and grazed a little apart from your big mountain horses." He turned to point at the 4 waiting patiently outside the corral, adding, "I hope he'll pick some others as well. We'd really be in a bad spot if we can't find at least 1 sane horse for each of our riders." Roland returned, leading Indy by the rope around his neck. With Chris and Rusty clearing the way for him, Roland hustled the blazed-faced gelding out at a high trot. As one of the other men stepped forward with a halter, Ada called, "No, let me do it. Andy can be a pain in the butt." Watching his sister out of the corner of his eye, Chris chuckled, slapped his rope at a couple of geldings who wanted to crash the gate, and called Rusty back after the dog had helped turn them. She was right. Indy needed all the right points of interaction met if he was going to help for the day. Roland returned, slowing to rebuild his loop, when the spirit Tarin came to his friend's side and laid her hand on his leather-covered thigh. No words were exchanged, yet Roland nodded and once more rode into the large corral. The next time he came to the gate, Chris asked, "What about Sour Patch?" Roland grinned, saying, "I got orders from Miss Purple over there. I'll get Sour Patch when she's done." Chris's gaze followed the big bay, and he watched his good horse get jostled around the corral by so many others. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. Ada was watching with him, another halter ready. Just leave it. Sour Patch will be okay. He's big and he's tough, and the Spirit Tarin has a hold on him. Can't you see he's actually helping Roland keep the horses in the corral?" With a significant glance, she turned to indicate the Spirit Tarin standing only a short distance away. Risking a quick glance back, he saw Megan. Her eyes shone a bright lavender, and the scars around them were vivid and pronounced, her violet hair blowing around her face. The horses showed no sign of stopping, running around the corral, biting and kicking each other. Only the men stationed outside the stout ropes, and Rusty always appearing where he was needed, prevented the herd from breaking out. Each time Roland rode in, he had to go with the flow of the circle until he found the mount he wanted. In quick succession, he brought out 3 others, until finally he turned his attention to Sour Patch. Chris breathed a sigh of relief when his friend led his good horse to Ada to be haltered. A little bit later, Chris had paired up with Brandon to put pack saddles on the recalcitrant mounts, and he came to appreciate the skill the old forest ranger showed. But much of their success was due to Megan. The Spirit Tarin stood close by, her eyes shining and her purple hair blowing around her face, and she calmed the horses being saddled. After securing the ropes to hold another load down, Brandon rubbed his thigh. The pack horse had managed to reach out and tag him with its hind leg, no doubt leaving a solid bruise. "Well, Mr. Fireman, I don't think you could have done anything about this, could you?" Casting an approving glance at the pregnant lady, Chris chuckled. "No, definitely not like that. Mine is all flash and show. This," after a pause he added, "my Tarin can't do quiet like this." Adam came to Chris's side. "Focus. You know we're going to need your horses today. There are only 11 rideable horses, and we got 12 people." Chris nodded. "Yeah, we kind of figured that, and we already talked about it. Ada and Roland are okay with your guys riding our horses." His smile turned into a feral grin, and he said, "I'll ride one of the crazy ones." Both Brandon and Adam spoke out at the same time. "No, you won't." And Adam continued, "We are trying to bring you home to those who are waiting, Focus. We are not taking any chances with you." Then Chris saw Ada and Roland bringing out the last 2 fighting horses so they could be haltered. Rusty was behind them, his tongue hanging out of his mouth and his sides heaving, but still ready to help. Adam took his cowboy hat off, held it in his hand like a bowl, and put 7 little stones in it. "Somebody's going to have to ride one of the crazy horses, and I'm going to make the guys that are capable draw for it. Does your sister—" He shook the hat, making the stones inside bounce around. Chris laughed wryly. "I think if you don't let her draw, you're definitely going to hear about it." Adam grinned back. "That's what I thought." Then he went around to those saddling and securing loads on the difficult pack horses, giving each person a chance to pick a stone out of the hat. Going to saddle Sour Patch, Chris stroked the dark bay neck affectionately. He loved the way his gelding moved, fleet and sure-footed, not heavy as the ponderous draft mixes he'd ridden the previous day. By chance, his eyes fell on Megan. She'd taken a seat by the extinguished fire and rubbed her forehead tiredly. He knew that feeling well. Getting Clory from the hitching rail, Chris led him to where the saddles were laid out on a log. Assuming the rig with the purple saddlebags to be hers, he quickly put it on the dark bay and then brought him to her. "Here you go, Tarin. This is a good one, and I know from experience he won't mind if you fall asleep on him." She looked up at him and chuckled tiredly. "Thanks, Chris." Then she rubbed her eyes again, once more the color of dark plums, without the inner light glimmering through. "You should be in better shape today, since we'll be going northwest now, but let me settle your Tarin while you're here." Rusty came to him then, but instead of putting his head under Chris's hand to be petted, he went to Megan's side and leaned against her heavily as he panted. "Your dog is an amazing animal. He helped a lot today," she said as she stroked Rusty's black and white coat. Chris smiled at his buddy as he adjusted his belt. The heavy axes and knife hanging from it tended to make it bind against his hips. "Thank you. He used to be my mother's dog, but for some reason he decided to come with me when she got hurt." He directed his gaze to the tired girl, saying, "My Tarin is fine for now, Megan. I'll come see you if the fire begins surging." She scoffed and shook her head. "I can feel it rising already. Give me your hand. You know as well as I do that it's not a problem. Never a problem." Yes, he knew the euphoria that she would find using her gift well, and he allowed her to settle the surges inside him. Hopefully he wouldn't need to use the blindfold to cool his eyes today if, as she'd said, they would be going in a direct line to their destination. The camp had been tidied, and the riders had taken their leads to the jumping, bucking pack horses and spare mounts. The lead travelers, including Ada, left the camp, trotting hard to stay ahead of the weed-crazed animals, leaving only Roland, Chris, and Torben behind. Helping Roland saddle a rearing, striking Palomino, Chris said, "What are you still doing here, Torben?" Somehow, the most ignorant horseman of their group had ended up on good old Shaky's back. The man spurred the big gelding's sides, then jerked the reins when the horse leapt forward. He couldn't have used worse signals, yet the stout sorrel gave it his best guess and, by luck, ended up in the right spot. "I was told to keep an eye on you." Once more stupidly jerking the reins back and over Shaky's withers, he turned to Roland. "Are you ever going to get on that nag? Come on, Mr. Super Buckaroo. Let's see you ride." Ignoring the archer, Chris sidled Sour Patch close to Roland. "I could just snub Crazy Yeller." His own pack string of 3 was tied to a stout tree, restlessly trotting or bucking in place and fighting their leads. Under his breath, Roland replied, "I'll be fine, but why don't you snub that idiot riding our good sorrel? That'll definitely help." Chris chuckled, but watched as Roland untied the frantic Palomino. "You're going to get your butt planted, you know." Roland grinned. "Oh, thanks for the vote of confidence, bro. I'll have you know that 3 whole cans of chew are riding on this." Chris said, "Copenhagen or that other long-leaf crap?" Holding on to the left rein, Roland guided the horse's jumps around him. "Dang, they didn't say. I hope it's Cope." Then Rusty came out from behind Chris to harry the yeller gelding. Ignoring the dog, the sturdy-built man pulled himself smoothly into the saddle. He found his stirrups and, using the hand on the bridle, guided his mount in a small jumping circle. The Palomino took 2 hard, powerful jumps to the side, but Roland easily flowed with his mount. Then he cursed and yelled, "God damn it, Rusty! Back! I don't need your help, you sorry moron!" Chris tried and failed to hide his laughter, but eventually took pity on his friend and called the dog back. But it made no difference, and the horse launched into another series of bucks. Chris called, 8 seconds, Roland! 8 seconds! And Torben laughed beside him. Roland let out a stream of curses, then used his reins to direct his jumping, skittering mount in a large circle, and they called, "Are you ever going to get on Sour Patch? Get that pack stream lined out and let's go!" Then he made one of his growling noises and reined Yeller out of the campsite and after the others. Keeping track of Roland's progress through the pines, Chris sidled Sour Patch over to untie his jumping, jigging string. Looking at Torben, he said, "Why are you not helping him? You should be ahead of him, guiding that pally to follow the trail." Torben battered Shaky into drawing closer. Imbuing his words with all the scorn he could find, he said, "I can't believe this is news to you, Focus, but I was told to keep you safe, not Cowboy Joe over there." Lining out the prancing, leaping horses behind him, Chris cringed. "Damn it, quit doing that!" Torben looked all about himself and said, "Quit doing what?" "Stop pulling on the left side of the bit to turn Shaky to the right." Chris huffed as he demonstrated while gathering his string of horses behind him and heading up the trail after the others. "Move your hand forward on the neck. is a neck rein. Neck rein. The signals are across the neck. Don't touch the bit unless you absolutely have to. Torben scoffed. Oh, now we're doing riding lessons? Okay, I'll try to pay close attention. Not quite too low for Chris to hear, the other man murmured, Useless farming nag, at Shaky, then trotted after Roland. Chris's blood boiled as he urged his spooking pack string to follow. There was little he could do about it, right here, right now. He had his hands full as the 3 horses behind him sped up and attempted to pass him at a run. Torben would pay for that remark, but for today, Shaky, their good family horse, would have to endure a very bad rider. It took almost an hour to catch up with Roland. He'd managed to slow the sweating, hard-breathing Palomino to a somewhat erratic trot. On a small meadow, fresh and beautiful with its new-growing vegetation, stout cottonwoods along the creek putting out new shoots, reviving their surroundings, the kid kept Crazy Yeller to slow circles, while a herd of elk regally ignored them to graze at the water's edge just below. Several buffalo, the new calves beside them, had already lain down to chew their cud in the shade of the ancient trees. They were utterly concerned with the travelers passing through their small paradise. Rusty ran out to investigate and was sent scurrying back, several shaggy, humpbacked mammas hot on his trail. In the noontime warmth, the last few snowdrifts along the lake bottom began to melt, making little muddy rivulets. Roland indicated the trail of hoof prints turning up a steep slope. The others are letting the crazy horses dictate their speed, and they can't keep that up much longer. Chris nodded, examining those in his string. The sides heaved with each breath, and sweat dripped from the white frothed sides. Roland's Yeller wasn't in any better shape, even as he reared again, shaking his head against the bridle. Shaky and Sour Patch were showing the effects of the hard pace, but seemed okay for now. He thought about how the horses had raced around the corral earlier. If miles were counted, most of the crazed mounts had already covered a day's worth of travel before leaving the camp. More even. And now the others had allowed their mounts to race over another 20 miles. In less than an hour. I don't know what we can do. We have to catch up with them. Roland grinned savagely, white teeth showing through his black beard, the axes secured at his belt bouncing off the Palomino's sides as the horse strutted in place. No, we don't. You're their precious focus. They can't keep going without you. Eventually, they'll wait for you. Chris chuckled as he nodded his agreement. The bigger trail followed the lake shore, but lots of hoof prints had churned through a shallow snowdrift, indicating the way the others had gone. Up into the mountains here? Chris asked, already turning his mount after the others. Roland nodded and followed the well-defined tracks. Torben, however, refused. What are you doing? That's not where we go. Last time, we followed the lake path. Chris indicated the hoof tracks before them, but Roland spoke first. Us super buckaroos have access to a special version of Google Maps, and it's showing us a shortcut. Looking back over his shoulder, he said, But don't worry about it. Backup drummer boys can't access that app, so just put your dreadlocks in a bunch and follow us. You'll be fine. Climbing up on the high mountain flat and skirting around a couple of ponds, they encountered antelope, rising to their feet and running at their approach, as well as shedding buffalo mothers who rose to their feet to threaten them with lowered heads and shaken horns. Brandon came towards them, riding long-legged Indy, and met them beside a stand of white-trunked Quakies. He didn't have any extra horses trailing behind him. Like Torben, he was an archer, and he had his bow strung and ready across the saddle. Waving impatiently for the 3 men to hurry, he said, You guys riding burros today? Let's kick this thing in gear. Urging Sour Patch closer, Chris said, How are your horses doing? Not the good ones, those that are weed crazy. Notice anything wrong? Brandon looked at the jigging horses falling behind Chris and said, They still have plenty to go in them, just like yours. Torben grumbled. I told them to get a move on, but him and Cowboy Joe over there wouldn't listen. As one of Chris's horses lunged ahead once more, he answered, Damn it, Brandon, these horses are on drugs. They will kill themselves if you let them. He looked up the trail, but could only see another high ridge ahead. Where are the others now? As they spoke, Roland's yeller reared and fought against the bridle again, even though his breath came in bellows and his sides were soaked in sweat. Brandon petted his mount's smooth, red-coated neck and nodded as he realized the import of Chris's words. They're waiting just over that ridge. We've made good time so far, and we only got a couple more miles to go. Roland slid off the agitated Palomino. I can walk the rest of the way, then. Old Yeller is pretty determined to kill himself. Once on the ground, he had to dance out of the way when the gelding tried to shoulder over him. Brandon snorted as he watched Roland use his stout bracers to divert Yeller's attempted bite. I think you better get back aboard. Right about now, the safest place around that horse is in the middle of his back. Roland cursed under his breath and asked, You said it's not too far to the next stop? I'll walk. I ain't never ridden a horse to death, and I don't intend to start now. Only a little while later, they found where the others waited for them, at the edge of another high mountain meadow, and Adam trotted towards them. What the heck kept you so long? We've been waiting here for more than an hour. Rusty ran to a little pond in the middle of the meadow and strode into it, lapping the cool water with relief. Megan trotted up to Chris, and her purple eyes held a hard glare. Why did you fall so far behind? We were worried to death about you. And put that blindfold on. My eyes hurt just looking at yours. Without even asking, she leaned from the saddle to lay her hand on his bare cheek. Chris batted her hand away. My Tarin is quiet, Megan, and you know that good and well. Then he gave her a sideways smile. I wanted to call, but my cell phone couldn't get any connection. I couldn't even send a text. Megan only gaped at him until Adam started to laugh and said, Yeah, that would have helped. As Torben resumed his place beside Chris, he said, Ooh, you pissed the boss lady off. Good move, moron. Roland approached, the fringe of his chinks making swishing sounds against his jeans as he walked through the thick grass. The Palomino jumped and bucked behind him, and his eyes were wild and rolling as he attempted to pull away. The weed had affected this horse the worst by far. Cautiously leading her own pack-string closer, Ada asked, What happened? Did you get bucked off? Have you been walking the whole way? Fending the Palomino away, again, Roland answered, No, I didn't get bucked off, and no, I didn't walk the whole way. Someone amongst the grinning group said, Sure you didn't. Roland pointed at Chris and Torben. They watched me ride. They can tell you I only got off when Brandon met up with us. While Chris loyally confirmed his friend, of course, Torben loudly proclaimed he'd only seen Roland walk. The entire way. Roland cursed and said, Liar, I rode for most of it. I only got off about a mile back. Brandon, you tell them. You saw me get off this nag. But Brandon only gave an evil grin and answered, I don't know what you're talking about. You were walking when I found you guys. Laughing quietly to himself, Adam gestured to the northwest. Our camp is only a couple miles that way, and some of our horses have started to come out of it. Let's go. We can deal with this mess there. But even as he spoke, one of the horses, the stout draft horse Cross Chris had ridden the previous morning, groaned loudly and lay down. The horse ahead, a small bay mare with a pack, struggled to stay on her feet as the heavy gelding's head and neck pulled on her, while the horse behind, a paint mare without a pack, reared against the lead rope pulling her towards the fallen gelding. She immediately set back, then tangled her legs in the rope when she jumped forward again. With another curse, Roland strode toward the archer. You doing anything right now? Any archery shooting thing taking your attention? No? Then hold my horse while I help turn that poor bastard loose. Just as he handed Torben the ends of the reins, Old Yeller jumped high once more, striking with his front feet. Roland jumped out of the way, and Torben cursed, but managed to stay out of the range of the flailing hooves. Chris jerked the cool cloth off his eyes again. He would have to be able to see details for this. But there wasn't much he could do. The horse on his lead still danced and jigged, while the two behind dully followed their lead ropes. Ada quickly dismounted and brought her horse to Megan. "Hold my skeleton for me," she said, as she handed the reins to the Tarin. All the horses in her packstream followed with dull eyes and wagging ears, their breathing harsh and deep. She untied them from each other and tied the leads around their necks, and the horses stood where they were, exhausted. Going from string to string, she took the ones who'd come out of their madness and turned them loose. The others, those who could not still their racing feet, she handed back to the riders. When she approached Chris, he said, "Nice knot on those halter ropes, sis." She grinned back at him. "Mama's, of course." Then she stopped to lay her hand on Sour Patch's neck. "You think she's okay?" Looking down at her, he said, "She's gotta be, right?" With a slap on his chink-covered leg, she nodded, then had to jump out of the way as the pack horse behind him spooked at the sound and fought the lead rope. Ada looked his 3 horses over, and Chris said, "I think the back 2 are fine, but be careful, this first mare likes to kick." Wishing he could help his little sister as she went about the job of separating the horses, he tried to guide the mare into slowing her feet, but she was still under the weed's power, unable to think straight. As his sister turned another thick-maned draft horse loose, that red gelding sank to his knees with a loud groan. He lay and trembled for a long moment, then valiantly rose to his feet again to stand with his head low and legs braced under him. When the horses had been separated, Adam came to Chris's side. "What is going on? We've only gone about 20 miles. None of our riding horses are even sweating hard." Still managing the crazed mare on his lead, Chris said, "This morning, when they were all running crazy circles round that catch corral, we caught all the easy ones first. But the rest ran around and around, unable to even slow down. How many miles do you think they ran while we caught and saddled?" Ada joined them, Megan by her side. "Even while tied to the trees waiting to be saddled, they acted like they were in some secret Zumba class. I bet if we'd put little Fitbit watches on them, you'd find they've traveled 70 or 80 miles today." She swept an arm around at the exhausted horses standing in the sun-bathed meadow, their heads low and eyes dulled, not eating, only resting. "Damn," Adam said, compassion in his eyes. Then, with a look at the afternoon sun, he nodded to himself. He called one of his guards over and gave him a few curt orders, and the man turned his horse, then raced away to disappear amongst the thick pines at the far end of the meadow. Turning back to the group, he explained, "He's going after more horses. We made such good time that we could finish the trip tonight, even if we have to ride in the dark for a few hours." While they waited, Roland, working with caution, stripped his saddle off the Yeller and put it on one of the extras. "I hate to say this, but I doubt this one's going to get over it. He might have overdosed on that crap." One of the guards took the lead from Torben. "Dang, I rode him yesterday. He is a nice horse." Crazy Yeller struck at the new man holding his reins, then reared up, shaking his head threateningly at the other rider. A while later, the guard returned across the meadow, another man trotting hard behind him. He was riding bareback on a fat little kid's pony, his feet brushing the tops of the grass as they approached. The travelers smiled and teased him about his mount, but he only waved their jokes away and drew close at him. "Boss man, we don't have enough horses for you," he said without preamble. "We got a flu going around them. They all got snotty noses and fevers." Adam let go of a stream of curses. "Damn it, Sean. You were supposed to be taking care of that kind of stuff. We're supposed to be able to get fresh horses from you." The man on the pony was not deterred. "And what did you think I could do about it? People trade horses out, looking for fresh ones, and someone brought us a sick one. Now they all got it. He indicated the shaggy pony under him. Only my 2 kids' ponies ain't sick. The rest all came down with it. Chris, sitting Sour Patch just behind Adam, said, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." He thought he'd kept his voice down, but Adam whirled about and fixed his black-eyed stare on him. "What the hell are you talking about?" Chris patted Sour Patch's neck. "Vaccinations, dude. Nobody's getting flu shots this year. The kids' ponies are fine, 'cause they've probably been hauled to every little gymkhana and fair for the last few years. And each time they got all their shots. And the good horses, those that people take to gatherings and rodeos, I imagine they'll be okay as well." He paused, then added, "For a while." Adam took his cowboy hat off, rubbed his thick black hair, and looked at the sun standing well above the horizon. "We've got a good 4 hours of daylight left, and you are telling me we can't go any further?" He replaced his hat and shook his head. "We're so close. One more hard ride and we'd be there." Sean stroked the thick mane of his little mount and grinned at Adam. "You should take the bikes." "What bikes?" Adam asked. Chris tried to hide his grin. Adam looked like a dog waiting for a stick to be thrown. Pointing to the east, not quite back the way they'd come, Sean said, "Me and the boys broke into one of the park service sheds the other day. We found about 100 bikes in it. Those little ones they rented out in the summers," he pointed to the east towards the lake, "they're only about 1.5 miles that way." Then he grinned at them and said, "Y'all can follow the blacktop road all the way. And once you get over a couple steep rises, the rest should be all downhill." This was a story from the Wyoming Tarin Rising series, and we want to thank you sincerely for listening. Please, press that like button now, since that will help the vid and get the story recommended for others. Besides, nothing makes a person's day more than seeing those likes. This part was called Wyoming Tarin's Rising, Horses and Weed. It was narrated by Joshua C. Williams and written by Ashakery Dart. It is copyrighted for December 7th, 2025. And we want to thank our editor, Victoria Stormson. Hopefully we'll have another one ready for you soon, so be sure to subscribe and check for updates.